I'm not going to start at a new company and immediately make enemies. All those strange AI projects, you really just shouldn't have done those, or you shouldn't even have asked us about them. I was completely wrong. Everybody immediately saw this is going to have a huge impact. We don't want to miss this change.
The idea of a large tech company trying to own the entire value chain and manufacturing news based on what's the most likely thing to get us engaging on Instagram is a very scary reality to live in.
It makes people think that there's now a tool that can solve problems at the push of a button. And that's never been the case. Whenever someone in leadership has been on LinkedIn for too long, it's usually a bad day for my team and me. But tech companies are also underestimating what it means to do journalism because they see everything through their content lenses. I'm kind of afraid what would happen if Google just decided to buy the New York Times.
Thanks for tuning into another episode of The Chief AI Officer. Today, I'm excited to bring you Marie Kilg, who is the Chief AI Officer at Deutsche Welle. Marie, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on.
Of course. I'm excited for today's conversation. Just before we started recording, we spent some time talking about our backgrounds in media, my failed media startup back in the day, and the difficulty of bringing innovation to media. So, before we get into all those topics, can you give our listeners just a little background on yourself and how you ended up as Chief AI Officer at Deutsche Welle?
Sure. Yeah, it might be interesting for me to recap that myself because Chief AI Officer definitely wasn't what I said I wanted to be in kindergarten. So I wanted to be a journalist. I was always interested in media. As a teenager, I kind of thought about the state of the world and how I want to play a part in improving the world as teenagers do. And so I kind of landed on, maybe because I also always liked writing and reading, I landed on information as kind of the start of every action. I thought if anybody wants to change the world in whatever way, they need to be informed first. They need to know what's going on, or they need to get a grasp of the situation first. And so that's why I studied communications and American studies for some reason, because I kind of wanted to have a mix of history and politics and literature. And then I went to journalism school. And then I kind of rediscovered my inner nerd and my science fiction heart. Because when I was just looking for my first jobs in journalism, that was when Amazon brought Alexa to Germany. And I had written chatbots as a hobby. I'd always been tech savvy and always been interested in tech. And also in my journalism school projects, I was always kind of the techie one. So when I saw that I could apply at Amazon and kind of be a joke writer and content editor for Alexa, I just had to do that. And so that's kind of my management side, or where I learned. I was a program manager, a project manager, a product manager, all of those things. And I ended up staying at Amazon for almost 5 years and moving into senior management. And so those are always the two hearts that I have, the heart for media and content, and the kind of how do we manage tech products? How can we make cool tech for cool audiences? And then after a while at Amazon, I kind of had enough of that for different reasons. Wanted to move away from that type of corporate world and back into media. And that's when I saw the opportunity at Deutsche Welle. I started in a normal innovation management role there, because I really wanted to work for an international media company too. I really liked the international aspect of what I did at Amazon. And my very first project at Deutsche Welle, I especially didn't mention AI. I tried to find projects, whatever project, as long as it doesn't have to do with AI, because from my early journalism days, or from how I knew the media industry back then, I thought I'm not going to start at a new company and immediately make enemies. But then after a few months of Deutsche Welle, that's when the current AI boom happened and when ChatGPT was launched, and then things quickly went to where Deutsche Welle recognized that I'm actually secretly into AI, and I've done a lot of AI projects on the side. And so I moved into this current role.
It's an exciting role to be in. Deutsche Welle, obviously a very large international broadcaster in Germany. Just saying that for those on the podcast in the US who might have less context. You said that it could make you enemies. Why would it make you enemies in the media world to be the person in AI? Seems like an innocuous question, but I'd love to hear your take.
I almost forgot those times, but in my early journalism days, in my internships and my first jobs, whenever I mentioned AI, I did meet a lot of backlash. Like I remember when I wanted to pitch a bot at a big German newspaper that I was working for at the time. And then I also just back then naively thought that I should ask for consent before using any data. So I went around and started asking the journalists, hey, like, do you mind if we use your text and feed them into a super simple neural network back then, but like just to see, like, can we get an AI to write in German? I had read one of the first blog articles by Andrej Karpathy on the neural networks dealing with language and how he fed Shakespeare into an RNN. And so I wanted to try that out, but like it was extremely, it was met with a lot of backlash. I got a lot of feedback, even like at the end of my term, like cool, whatever you did in like actual writing, and your journalistic work was okay, but all those strange AI projects, you really just shouldn't have done those, or you shouldn't even have asked us about them. So yeah, that's changed a lot.
I can imagine it's hard to ignore AI today. It was probably a little bit easier for media companies to push it out of their mind and try to push it away from what's going on in journalism. Looking at the landscape today, how has Deutsche Welle's stance changed? Or how have journalists changed in the way that you're interacting with them today and how they think about AI?
Deutsche Welle is interesting because like I don't have the comparison, right? Because back then it was like 2016, 2017, I think. And then I moved away from journalism and the media industry, and then I came back in 2022 or 21. So I don't know if Deutsche Welle is different or if the media industry as a whole like also changed in that same time. But now, like ever since I moved back into media, I feel like everybody is much more open than I would have thought. I feel like the media industry, or at least the bubble, the people I'm speaking with, they got on board really, really quickly with the AI boom. Like even though I was in the media industry before and after the ChatGPT moment, I kind of thought like, okay, it's going to take them a while to catch on, and it's going to be like with Facebook, that they're going to be in denial for a couple of years first before they kind of realize that this is an important technology. And I was completely wrong. Everybody like immediately saw this is going to have a huge impact. We don't want to miss this change. We want to learn about it. And everybody was much more open also about like implementation projects and learning than I would have thought.
And I'd love to get into that a little bit in terms of how Deutsche Welle and you see it, right? I think there is the distribution aspect to it, right? Facebook, you brought it up, a good example of radically changing the distribution model for media companies. AI does the same thing to a large extent in terms of how it will cite sources or not cite sources when it's giving people answers, but it's certainly seeing, at least in other industries, a large drop in traffic to the sites that are kind of the content providers. So let's talk about AI on the distribution side first, and then I'd love to get into AI on the journalism and kind of operations side at Deutsche Welle and how it's being used.
Yeah, sure. Because that's what's super interesting about our industry, right? Is that we have those two aspects. The distribution side is what, to be fair, we as an industry or business has been information processing, right? So it's the whole chain. And for the largest part of our history, we also owned distribution. We used to have the printing press right next to the editorial team. And we only moved away from that in the past decade or so, maybe even, right? It's a pretty recent development. We also used to be very close to the antennas and how how distribution works technically. So I think in a way it's new for us that we have competition in tech companies. And we shouldn't only look at the distribution side for that, because the main thing about this change right now is that we don't just have competition in only the distribution like we did with Facebook, but that AI is kind of making tech companies a competitor along the whole production chain. They're competitors in research, which is at the beginning of the process. They're competitors in production, in editing, in really processing information in the sense of creating stories out of raw data. And they're competitors in the distribution. And of course, they want to, or the tech companies obviously want to integrate that whole chain, because it's an extremely attractive idea that you could just, start with the user data and whatever you think the Instagram algorithm should show people to maximize your ad revenue, and then work backwards from there and just create the content that you need for whatever you want to tell your client in the ads business. So it kind of all belongs together. And I think also when I think about AI at DW, I think we have to look at the whole production chain to see what we can deliver, what our unique selling point is now with these new with these new tech companies as competition. And that also has to be integrated along the whole production chain. Because if we just look at distribution, then we're going to fall into the same trap as we did in the previous tech shift with social media, that we're just going to be okay, somebody else is doing the distribution now, cool. It means we have to be on Facebook now. What does Facebook want? They want horizontal videos. Okay, let's create horizontal videos. Oh, no, now they want vertical videos. So we have to shift everything to vertical. And then before we know it, we're in a dependency. We don't own the data. We don't own the relationship to our audiences in the same way as before. And we're just in a really bad situation.
Yeah, I think that disconnect from the user base is very, very difficult. Media companies have been struggling with it for a long time. And hearing you talk about that, the idea of a large tech company trying to own the entire value chain and manufacturing news based on what's the most likely thing to get us engaging on Instagram is a very scary reality to live in. I can see no way in which that produces high quality journalism that is designed to inform citizens about what's going on around the world. How do you see that? Yeah. Yeah. How do you see your role as a media, as a media organization? You're not just competing on distribution, as you said, you're competing on creation. There's huge opportunity, I can imagine, for journalists at Deutsche Welle to use deep research, to use all of these tools to get rid of some of the very tedious tasks and to maybe focus on the very human element, finding the sources, talking to people. Yeah, I mean, you're closer to this, but what is adoption like for those technologies across journalists within Deutsche Welle? And then how are you helping them as chief AI officer? What is your role in managing that transformation?
Yeah. So I think I said that my view of the media industry as a whole is that we've really gotten much better at innovating and at being open for technology and at asking the right questions. So I don't see any media company that I've worked with, which is obviously a bias, but I don't see anybody being in denial about our industry needing to change. I think there's a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty in the sense of, okay, everybody is in agreement that there's this huge disruption coming or already here, but what to do with it, how to turn that disruption into action. That's something that's hard for a lot of people, just because this huge AI hype creates so much overwhelm, right? And then you see so many things on LinkedIn about what's potentially possible, but you don't know what to even believe and what not to believe. And you have the whole disinformation aspect, which of course puts AI in a rather negative light. for journalism. And then you have maybe tools that you see somebody using, but you don't know, like, will our media company be flexible enough to adapt? Or what about the legal and data security aspects of it? And you maybe know something that you can use privately, but you can't use it at your company. So in all this huge, confusing, scary disruption, I think my role is very much about communication. I have to have a vision for our employees about like what AI can do for us, how we could use it, how we can step up and not be fearful and not just wait what the tech companies are doing or wait if we'll have a business in 10 years or not, but like to proactively think about how we want to shape this development, how we would like to use tech, what we would like tools to be able to do for us and how we can make that happen. I have to temper expectations a lot of the time. Whenever like someone in leadership has been on LinkedIn for too long, it's usually a bad day for my team and me, because they'll have lots of ideas, that some of which are unrealistic, and we kind of have to ground them again. And so I think that's why my role is useful in my current organization. It's not that we've never worked with AI and automation. It's not that I'm needed to like, tell this organization what the technology is or how to use it, because like, we're actually an organization that has a long history of working with tech, and lots of good people with lots of good ideas and lots of like deep technical expertise. But because the hype is so huge, we can't have just 100 people with 1,000 ideas springing up projects everywhere with nobody to kind of streamline the efforts a little bit and help leadership prioritize, help allocate the budget to the most important projects, and kind of give everyone in the company a North Star or a vision of what we're trying to do and where we're going.
And walk me through some of those conversations. So, one, what are some of the unrealistic expectations that people after a heavy day on LinkedIn come to you with? What do they wish could happen overnight that might not? What are some of the projects that you're prioritizing? How do you prioritize them at Deutsche Welle? And then I guess, what is your vision as you try to define what AI means in journalism for Deutsche Welle? So there's a lot of questions there, but I'd love to understand.
Okay.
I'd love to understand more. Yeah,
I'll try to remember them at 7 in the evening. The 3 questions. I'm not gonna tell you specifics about unrealistic expectations in my leadership, because if anybody at my company is listening, I don't want them to think it's their boss. Actually, like most people I work with are super smart, but I can tell you more generally what people I meet sometimes think, and it's that take a hype buzzword like AI agents. They read about what this can do, and we've had the same with like every step of the AI hype since ChatGPT launched. They hear about some new capability. It was the same with Sora. It was the same with GPT-4. And the way that some people present this step up in abilities is that it makes people think that there's now a tool that can solve problems at the push of a button. And that's never been the case. I'm really not sure that this type of tool is ever coming. It's a big debate in circles who talk about AGI, ASI. But we do have these headlines in media and in other industries of CEOs who say, yeah, we let, 10% of our employees go because AI is now stepping in. And then sometimes that might even be true, because maybe they spend a lot of time automating processes and investing in robust tooling, and they really need fewer employees now. A lot of the time also we know that it's just PR, and it's just maybe the thing that's that feels better to say, rather than it's economically tricky times, and that's why we're letting 10% of our people go. I've also heard that sometimes those people are hired back then. if it's really like a rushed decision and you think you can replace employees by AI, and then you realize that the implementation is actually more complex than that.
I think Klarna was a famous example of that recently, right? Where they fired a lot of people and brought them back. And yeah, it's funny. The LinkedIn feed is full of people telling you that every new tiny step in innovation is destroying everyone's jobs overnight, and everything is a game changer. It's not a very measured place to think about AI.
Right. No, and I'm the last person to complain, right? If somebody is like, as we said, like open to innovation and sees the potential and is optimistic about AI, like especially in an industry like the media, where I used to complain that they just want to do business as usual always, and they're not interested in tech, like I am. So it's cool that they see the opportunity. But I think if you're not into the tech, and if you're not a bit more deeply into what is happening in AI, then it sounds like you can push a button and the AI will do things for you, and it doesn't sound like what it really is, which is you have to have a super robust infrastructure, you have to have your data in order, you have to really know what you're doing, and then you have to invest in project management, in the implementation, in the hardware or in the compute. And so that's kind of where I try to help set expectations.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. I remember I used to work at a conversational AI company that was based in Berlin, in Germany, actually. And we used to always joke that businesses would come in expecting that you could just push the AI button and it would just automate all of their customer conversations for you without thinking about the underlying infrastructure and like customer intents and what it meant. This was before LLMs as well. So it was really, there is always that expectation with AI that it is just magic, and people don't really think about all of the deep data integration infrastructure work that has to go into deploying it. And then that there are very significant limitations to what the models are capable of. And granted, they're getting better every day, but there are also some fundamental limitations to how they work that are very hard to understand if you're just reading the hype and you're not working in the business every day.
And it's mean, right?
In terms of...
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
I was going to say it's mean because it is magic in a way, right? Like if you look at a process or a thing that you're doing at your company on the granular level, then it is true that we are getting new tools at the moment that feel like magic, and that can help us with a lot of things. Like one of the things I just thought of is metadata creation. It used to be super tedious, and you would have to manually input the metadata for every piece of content that you created. And it's true that you don't have to do that anymore because AI can help you. So it's actually, it's not that far off that you would think, cool, we don't have to clean up any of our databases because AI can sort through them. There's a world in which that might be possible, but it's a bit more complex than that, because at least you would need to give whatever AI tool you're using access to all the right databases in the places where you want it to clean things up. And that's where it gets complicated, because you have to have the right interfaces for the AI to even go in there. And it's still a huge project, even if maybe on some level it's true that the AI, once it gets in there and once you get the AI to the right place, it can work magic for you. But
I love that example because it's such a specific example of the way that it can have a lot of value in a constrained domain, like generating the metadata for an article or whatever it might be. And on the surface, that feels small, but it can have a massive impact on efficiency within the company and take out this very tedious task from the process. But then at the implementation side, like, yes, you could do that easily for one article, but if you want to scale that across every single article that gets produced in Deutsche Welle, then you have to think about permissions, like access control, like what is
and we don't just have articles, but we have videos, and we have videos on YouTube and videos on Instagram, and some of our teams manage their editorial processes using Dropbox because it's faster for the people working at home rather than using whatever they're supposed to be using. And then you have all this complexity of a large organization, and you don't still have that AI that you could just send that complexity to and have it clean it up. And that's a good thing, because that would be a huge security risk.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the devil is always in the details with these, where I think it's harder to implement. A lot of people on this show talk about those difficulties in implementation and the challenge of managing expectations between this magical experience of the technology and the reality of what deploying at scale really means. To come back to your original framing of some of what you're doing at Deutsche Welle, like from a vision standpoint, what is the vision that you're building, and how do you get people excited about that?
Yeah, so the vision is exactly that, and it's not an easy one to achieve, but I hope that if we start building towards it now, it's not impossible. It actually ties in pretty neatly with what we talked about. I spoke about the production chain, right? We have some tools that can really help us in research because they can bring the whole company closer together. They can make it easier for Team A to find out what Team B is working on, or for researchers accessing the archives, all of that stuff. Then we move into production. We have very different AI tools for production, but you can think about production automation, like automated editing, translation, transcription, subtitling. That's actually something that we've been doing for many, many years already, because Deutsche Welle has 32 languages. Then you move on to distribution, and we have the changing user habits, but we have like huge potential. Like we could use MCP servers to make our content more accessible, or we could have conversational AI tools for distribution, or we could have better recommendation algorithms. And then we have the interaction with the audience, where we want to know what worked, where we want to know what they're interested in. We want to build a community. We want to understand what really moves our audiences and what is valuable for them. And so ideally, that data from that last step gets fed back into the process. I mentioned this before when we spoke about like what might happen, what Instagram might be trying to do. But I think it's something that is definitely achievable for us as a media company to do. And so it's going to be a lot of work, but if we do it right, we'll have a flywheel. We'll know what works for our audiences. We'll have a super good grasp of our communities, because it will also, in part by AI, become easier to manage those communities, to have conversations with them, to filter the valuable insights from the noise. And then we'll use those insights to improve our journalism, improve our content, or improve the stories we tell and how we tell them, because AI gives us the means to scale up the storytelling, to have more content in different forms for different audiences, to translate not just between languages, but between content formats, between user situations, all of that. And the only tiny little thing we need for this flywheel to work is a robust data management system and infrastructure, right? Or it's going to be more than one system, but we need the ability to funnel data from every step of this chain to the next and back through the flywheel. And so that means that we have a lot of cleaning up to do, because in many media companies that I know, it's many different systems, and we didn't have the need for this type of integration and robustness and interoperability in the past. It used to be totally fine if like the people who are writing articles don't have much to do with the people making the TV show, or if you need something, you can just call, and that used to be scalable. But now, because AI gives us all these opportunities to really scale up our production in that way and to make our content and our stories way more useful, that means that we have to scale up the infrastructure below. We need to have interoperable databases, and we need to like get all our processes in order. And that also means everything around it, right? The administration and everything that kind of feeds the day-to-day production of journalism. There's a lot of opportunity for automation there too, obviously. So I have no trouble imagining this dream world for journalism where we do, like we do today, stuff that is really valuable for our audiences, but we're unable to do it much more efficiently and much more personally than we're doing today.
That's a very good vision for the opportunity that sits in front of media companies. Fundamentally, it also sounds like it requires transforming into a technology company to a large extent, in a much more meaningful way than media companies are today, or than many are today. What will cause that to fail? Like, what are the biggest challenges to getting to that vision for you? And how are you trying to actively mitigate them?
What's slowing us down is the processes and like the establishment, not in the sense of people, but in the sense of how the organizations are built that make it harder to innovate. And there's exceptions. I know some media companies who already have like great informational systems and also great organizational structures that make it much easier to innovate. But as I said, like most media companies, and Deutsche Welle is one of them, you kind of grew over time. And with each new technology, like from printing to radio to TV to social media, you kind of just added on to your organizational structure and also to your technology structure. And you had to make all these decisions about what tool to buy here and what tool to build there. And now you have this complexity that's making it harder to transform. And also complexity on an organizational level, right? Because like somebody who's responsible for a process or a tool on one end might have reasons to not want to change that, or like maybe that person has already changed this process so many times in the past 40 years, and they're just tired and they don't want to go through another transformation. And same goes not just for the owners of the tools or the processes, but also the people who work with them. So that's the hard part, and nobody loves change, I think. I think it's not a very human thing to love change. And especially organizations are usually not good at change, and especially large public broadcasters probably are not the most flexible organizations you can imagine. I often have like this comparison with Amazon in my head, because that's where I spent so much time. And Amazon has some really, really good mechanisms and processes for decision making, and it's very hierarchical and very top down. And so things move much, much faster there. And I'm not saying that we should become like Amazon, but we do need to become a tech company, not just in the sense that we know tech and we're really good at implementing tech, because like we already do that in many different small ways, but we should become more similar to the tech companies in the sense that we create mechanisms that enable us to constantly change and innovate and not be afraid of the work that innovation and transformation means. And recreate our processes so they don't hinder us and so they don't create much more work than necessary, because that's just slowing down the transformation process. It's tough, but I'm in so many meetings where I just see that a company pulls in 12 different stakeholders for a very simple decision, but then it turns out that none of those 12 stakeholders actually kind of want to make the decision, or maybe the person who could make the decision is actually not one of the 12 people who was invited to the meeting. And then you spend a lot of time talking about the potential, and the meeting just ends with not an action item, but that was a nice chat, let's just chat again next month. And so that's just something that I think some media companies have that, because the day-to-day of your news production used to be pressure enough for good business. If you have to print a newspaper page at the end of the day, then that page is going to get done. And then you have those 2 conferences in the day, and everybody will have enough pressure as is to get that newspaper page out the door. But as our business is shifting and as our organizational structures are shifting, we see that in a lot of places where we don't have this kind of pressure and that kind of clear vision of what to deliver, our processes and our communication are failing us because we don't have clear leadership, or we don't have a clear deadline on a project, or we don't have a clear goal. And so people just start flailing and calling in more meetings and writing more emails. And yeah, we need to counter that not just with culture change, but with mechanisms. Because I'm not blaming any single person who's writing an email too many, or who's in a meeting where they shouldn't be. Because that's like, on a human level, there's always reasons for that. It's always very understandable. But I think an organization has to counter that with good mechanisms and with good leadership. And then I don't think that the culture change can't happen. I don't think that we can't become tech companies and become really agile and really innovative companies. I think it's entirely possible.
Yeah, a lot of people on this show talk about AI transformation as always coming down to change management a lot of the time within an organization. There is this, I guess, debate, maybe not a debate, but a conversation going on right now on the very small startups that are kind of AI native being able to move so much faster in all of these things because they're building all of their processes from the ground like this. Do you think that that will be hugely disruptive, or do you think that Deutsche Welle, for example, you could make the flip side to that argument, which is that Deutsche Welle has the archive, the distribution advantage, like all of the things that could make vertical, like total value chain integration incredibly successful for you? Where do you land on that? Do you think, like, are you scared of the startups? Do you think you have a unique advantage? And like, how are you positioning that in your conversations with other leaders?
Yeah, I do want to talk about what we have going for us, because I think it's a lot.
Yeah.
Some of this might be coping and just me trying to be optimistic, because like, I'll make the counter argument first. There's no reason why a startup shouldn't be extremely successful in media, right? Or a tech company be extremely successful with that type of vertical content integration. Luckily, everything I've seen from especially the tech giants until now does confirm for me that media is not that simple. I'm kind of afraid what would happen if Google just decided to buy the New York Times or something like that, because they could buy all that organizational knowledge and all that journalistic quality that they don't have. But I think tech companies are also underestimating what it means to do journalism, because they see everything through their content lenses and they're optimizing for very different metrics than what journalism or what society thinks that journalism should optimize for, right? We're not just in media optimizing only for engagement or whatever. But some media companies in the past years tried optimizing for clicks, but we see how that went. It's not what society needs of journalism, and it's not what journalism is trying to do. So what we have going for us is actually, I think, super valuable in this time, because again, along the whole chain, we have decades of experience in how to make good content. We know how to do research, which might sound simple in like this day and age where you have powerful search tools, but research on the level of journalism and storytelling also means you have to be able to validate sources, you have to have connections, you have to know how to find stories, where a story starts, especially like if you think about investigative or political journalism, you have to be there a lot of the time. You have to have the trust of politicians who want to talk to you. You have to have the know-how and the balls to go into a war zone and to be there when something happens, and then to know how to contextualize what you've seen, how to verify what you think happened with credible sources, with third-party information. And so all of that is industry knowledge that many of the people working in media have built up over decades, and that just like you can't just learn that overnight. And same goes for the other parts of the production chain, right? How to tell a story so that it really engages your audience. That's something that's constantly changing. So that is something that journalism in a lot of places is struggling with, because of course like a 15 or an 18-year-old like needs a very different type of storytelling than a 70-year-old. But we do have a lot of knowledge in content creation, in the sense that you have complex information, and the AI hype is actually the best example. You have a situation that is causing uncertainty for a lot of people. You have a technology that is very complex. You have a lot of misinformation, a lot of people talking bullshit about this technology. You have a technology that is disrupting every part of society, that is kind of influencing media and politics and culture and sports and everything. And you have a lot of demand for cutting through that complexity, for turning all that information, all that noise into something that you can process as a citizen, as a consumer, however you want to call it. So that's something that good journalism has been doing forever, and that is not trivial. And especially like with the political situation in so many places of the world, it's more necessary than ever. And I think we see a lot of people also realizing that the more AI floods the internet, the more they are looking for, where's the good information? Where's the information I can trust? And ideally, where's the information that I don't just trust to be true, but it is also presented in a way that feels good for me to engage with. So I think that's what we have to double down on, because we know how to do this. We've sometimes, in some aspects of our business, fallen into the trap in the recent years of also trying to be like tech companies, in the sense that we optimize for just some metrics and then overfit on that, like with clickbait headlines. But we actually know how to build relationship with audiences, how to tell good stories. And for some reason, I don't think that the tech companies are there yet in realizing the value of this kind of information and relation and trust. And I think they just have a very different view of content.
I agree with you. It's a very difficult thing. A lot of people talk about taste in the context of AI, right? And what that means. I think media companies are a great example of taste applied to every part of that value chain. The relationships, there's so much there. Ultimately, there is a very human element that remains in media. And I think, to your point, people are hungry for that. So there is a lot of noise, and it can be very hard to break through. But if you stay true to those principles and use technology as a way to empower the humans and make more human content, I think you'll go very far. I could talk to you about this for probably another 5 hours, Marie. Honestly, I love these topics, but that's all we have time for today. I want to ask like a few just like quick fire questions in a lightning round, which is maybe just personally, what for you is the AI tool that you use the most that people might not expect?
AI tool. I was just going to say the YouTube Shorts algorithm, because that's an embarrassing answer. I'm trying to get away from that. But that is not a tool. So I'm going to say I use Obsidian to organize my notes. It's kind of a information management note, Zettelkasten type tool. And I have a couple of really cool AI integrations in there, like smart connections that whenever I add a new note, this tool creates embeddings of all the files that I have saved in my vault. And so when I write something or when I'm preparing an interview, like this tool automatically checks what I'm currently writing against everything that I've written before or that I've saved from the internet. And that's extremely useful. Yeah. Smart connections.
I've heard about Obsidian before, and I've heard people building like Claude Code agents and stuff on top of it in a very, very useful way. So that's another reminder to me to go check it out. I have it downloaded on my phone without having set it up yet. Where do you go to cut through some of the AI hype and find some signal in terms of information about what's going on in the market?
I love podcasts, and I think my favorite one for especially this transformation in the media space is Decoder with Nilay Patel from The Verge. He's just so smart, and like he has the best thoughts about how the media industry is changing. And I think he used to be a lawyer, so he also has a really interesting perspective on the legal proceedings there. So yeah, Nilay Patel.
Great. I will check that out personally as well. The media, like privacy and legal aspects, all very interesting in this space that we didn't even touch on.
Right,
Last question, what's a contrarian view, or what's something that you think about AI in media that many people disagree with?
I think that this AI hype is a much needed disruption. I'm afraid of the change too, and I get why everybody's afraid of the disruption. But I really think what we're seeing, like all the breaking points that AI is surfacing, are breaking points that are not new, right? AI slop and fake news. We would have disinformation, misinformation even without AI tools. It was just a bit more work, but it was a problem before. It's just being exacerbated now by AI, or the role that algorithms are playing for discourse in society, and the relation of powerful tech companies versus governments versus citizens. All those things, I feel like AI is bringing them to the surface. And I think it's good because it's going to push a couple of people and a couple of organizations and a couple of leaders over the edge to where hopefully there'll be action and we'll be building something new and something better. I
love that. Ending on a positive note despite some of the warnings. It's always good. No, it's important to do that, to remember, at the end of the day, it's always a tool, and it's about how we use it and how it forces the decisions that we should make about what we value in society. If people want to follow your work, Marie, where should they go?
Follow me on LinkedIn. That's where I post most, and also especially if you're interested about Deutsche Welle, I reshare a lot of what the cool teams at DW are doing. And if you have German listeners, I have my own podcast, Der KI Podcast, by ARD, which is the German public broadcaster. And it's called Der KI Podcast, so it's not super easy to find, but if you look for ARD, Der KI Podcast, or my name, then you'll find it.
Okay, amazing. If there's any German listeners here, then go check that out. Marie, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Ben. I really enjoyed this.